Hello YouTube. Here's a very different video for me. I've never done anything like this, at least being like the host side of things. I do a lot of podcasts and things, especially lately since the little COVID pandemic thing. But I wanted to let you guys in on a conversation that I'm going to have with Nick, or Terminal Radness on Instagram. Now, Nick has been a good friend of mine for a lot of years, and if you're unaware of his work, go check out his Instagram at Terminal Radness. He is a graphic designer and illustrator who is really, really good. He's worked with Blink-182, he's worked with Pearl Jam, he's worked with Dinosaur Jr., he's worked with like any cool big band, he's probably done some work with them. He's worked with Adidas, he's worked with like big companies, and he's currently working with a really big high-end company. He didn't mention the name of it during our little podcast thing here, so maybe I don't know if he's not allowed to talk about it, but he is smart. He's artistic. And I just wanted to have a conversation with him about hair, about art, and about branding. So, if you'd like to be a fly on the wall, keep watching. It's a long video, but hopefully it's fun and entertaining and most of all, educational.
Am I wearing this beanie right?
Yeah, looks good.
I still want to remember like in 2005 when you would wear a beanie like kind of high in the front with a little hair coming out and then like low in the back and kind of bunched up.
Yeah.
It's still my go-to. It's still like what feels comfortable for me, but I'm like, no, the kids aren't doing it that way these days. Thank you for taking this call. I know you have like a family and stuff to do and everything, but man, so I've never done anything like this, obviously, and I don't know if I'm going to be any good at being like a host of sorts. I'm hoping you can talk more than I do, but actually that's hard to do. I talk quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I told you while we were texting, I wanted to just talk about art and talk about branding. The title of this video is going to be Hair, Art, and Branding with Terminal Radness. And so I told you I was writing down bullet points and talking points, but I really didn't. I really just like looked at YouTube videos. So I'm hoping that we can forget that we're recording and just kind of talk naturally as we usually do.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. First thing that comes to my mind, like what I want to ask you about is kind of like the community of people who do what you do, like illustrators. I don't know how well connected you are with other people who do what you do, but I know like in the hair industry, we have, first of all, everybody's like connected through social media, through networking events and things. Like we all go to hair shows and stuff. But at the same time, what I'm curious about is like, I see an awful lot of hairdressers and barbers who are really quick to claim that they're artists. And at the same time, you look at their work and they're not doing anything artistic. They're doing like copies of normal haircuts. And so I guess what I'm curious about is like, are there people in your industry who, even though they're artists, like you really wouldn't consider them artists? Like you're like, dude, that guy's just doing like font work. Like, I don't know. And then would they be quick to call themselves artists, even if they're not doing anything too artistic, if you know what I mean? Or, and to me, I guess like what I automatically assume about art is that it has to be kind of vulnerable. Like you have to do something that's different and going to get some hate. And so when I see somebody doing comfortable work over and over and over, I'm like, do not call yourself an artist. And I don't know if there's any kind of
Are you calling me out right now?
Yeah, exactly. But do you see that in your industry, like a huge spread between like way creative and then not so creative, but everybody kind of still considers themselves artists?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because graphic design is like really utilitarian. So like it serves a purpose. So I feel like there's things that are made to serve a purpose and then things that are made to be creative. So it like, I mean, I guess it's all art, but it's like what a guy who's doing like typesetting for a book consider himself artist, like an artist, like possibly not. But then there are artists who do like typesetting. It's kind of like it's kind of strange. I guess it's just like the context of how it's presented.
Yeah.
Like you could look at like a page from a book in a gallery and it would be art versus like you're looking at a page for like a job interview or something like that, which is like not art.
I'm just picturing like a graphic designer applying for a job and giving them their resume, and it just looks like a normal resume, but like secretly the resume itself is like their portfolio. They're like, look at how good my font is.
A little bit. I mean, it's funny though, like, sorry, this is off track, but like I've seen a lot of
Right.
like people who you would think would have like an insane, like, oh man, their resume must look insane, and it's just like, like someone who's like applying for a gas station position's resume would look like identical.
I mean, I would imagine people who do what you do can't do real work, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
resumes are blank. That's a lot like hairdressers and barbers. It's like, well, I worked
Yeah.
at Wendy's and then I went to cosmetology school and then that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I guess art, like there's like art is a context sort of. So it's hard to like, I don't know. I mean, I've never really, I guess, thought about that, but I think, yeah, that for me, there's definitely two camps. I mean, like, I'm sure for you, there's like going to a salon and then going to supercuts.
Right. Right.
Like one is like purely functional.
Well, and more specifically, and the reason that I even bring it up and the reason it kind of irritates me is like there are people who will do, 10 haircuts a day in a barbershop and their average client is the average person who wants the average haircut. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But then there's people who are doing editorial stuff and they're trying to push the limits of like the fashion of hair and they're making hair do crazy stuff that normal people wouldn't want. And so it should be very obvious that it's even though they're both cutting hair, they're doing completely different things and completely different ends of the market. But for whatever reason, like if I try to post a more artistic, weird look, people come out of nowhere to be like, that's the worst haircut I've ever seen. I'm like, it's not meant to be a regular haircut for a regular person on a regular day. And
Right.
so there's a lot of like I guess haters online who it's funny because you would never see the artistic crowd in hair go to a regular barber's page and go, this is just crap. This is so regular. Like you are boring. You would never see them
Yeah.
talking crap that way, but all day long you see it the other way. Like somebody who's very busy doing regular haircuts they'll see something that's not regular and they go, oh, you did it wrong. By the way, I'm an artist. I'm like, well, at least like if you're going to look at some creative work and say that you don't like it and say that you don't want to do creative work, at least don't call yourself an artist. I guess that's why it bothers me. It's like some people are like, oh, I got into this line of work so I could be creative and so I could push the limits of fashion, and then they end up at like a regular barbershop doing regular haircuts. And I'm like, okay, I know what you wanted to do, but you didn't do it. And
Yeah.
all it takes is like you get someone to come in for a free haircut, you give them a weird haircut, you take a picture of it, and then bam, now you're an artist. Now I'll accept it.
Well, I mean, like, I think though there's people who want something, but they're not willing to make themselves vulnerable. Like they're doing what work that's safe.
Yeah.
That's just like, I mean, it's kind of just like there's all, I mean, in art too, there's like just a huge circle jerk of people that like,
Draw reapers.
oh, you did that thing again. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All reapers. And so like, I mean, it's, yeah, like I just think like there's people who want something but aren't willing to make themselves vulnerable or put themselves out there to do that or take criticism.
Do you think so? You're obviously a superstar at what you do. Have you had any or possibly many points in your career where you drew something you were afraid to put out, like where you felt that vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of where everything started for me. Like I had, I mean, like I had work that I was doing commercially and it didn't look anything like what was in my sketchbook. So what happened was like I was doing things basically, I mean, I look at it as like I traded my time for money in some regards. Like I I was doing things that weren't really what I wanted to be doing, but I needed to be doing them to make money or get by or whatever,
Yeah.
or like be seen. So like to be a lot more specific, I was doing like a lot of like work for like death metal bands and things like that I'm really like have no interest in. But like that's who was buying like merchandise designs at the time. So like I was doing stuff that just is not in my interest or anything I liked really. Things that were like neon. Well, like I do use neon colors, but like think about like 2005 like Hot Topic T-shirt,
Yeah. Yeah. With the Warped Tour
10
scene.
color, yeah, 10 colored print with like a bear throwing up or something
Yeah.
like that. That
What was
like I
that
just,
brand back then? Rocket?
yeah, stuff like that I didn't resonate with at all. But like I was just doing because like, oh, that's what you do to kind of like build up your portfolio and whatever. And so what happened for me was like, I was at Comic-Con and an artist I admired was there. So I ended up talking with him, and he was like a really cool dude. So we just talked for like an hour or two, and I ended up showing him I showed him the stuff I had been doing like commercially, and then I showed him my sketchbook. He's like, dude, like, what do you like? Why are you wasting your time with all that other shit? Like, this is what you should be putting out there. Like, this stuff rules. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, like, it's just like the little drawings I do like in between meetings and whatever. And it's like, no, dude, like, start a blog, like, which is like, then coincidentally enough, I had a blog, which was Terminal Radness, which like posting like horror movie, like not horror movie, but like just like B movie scenes and like action movie stuff and like weird gifs and whatever on like Tumblr. And so then once I started putting my work out there, it started resonating with people. So it was something I was scared to do, but because it resonated with like a couple people I knew, like,
You got like some validation from people you looked up to, and it gave you
yeah,
courage to kind of show everyone.
yeah. So once I did that, it was kind of weird, but it like kind of took off by just by accident. So, I mean, you really have to, if you're going to take a chance, like I mean, you need to make yourself vulnerable. Like if you want to actually
Your
do
shot.
something. Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I never heard that part of your story, but uh, yeah, absolutely. In hair, that's like, I get a lot of people who ask me how they can become an educator. They go, "Oh, I want to travel the world and get on stage and teach and stuff." And I've been fortunate enough to do that myself. But my first tip is you have to say things that people are going to disagree with, and not come up with things specifically to make people disagree. But you have to, if you're just saying what everybody agrees with, nobody's going to put you on a stage to say it. You know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah.
It's like if you're drawing what everyone else is drawing, why are they going to hire you over the other everyone else who's drawing it? And you have to do that thing that's different. And it sounds so cliche to be like, oh, you have to be different, but I think more specifically, you have to be. You almost have to like, and tell me if this resonates. Like, I know that when I come up with my curriculums and things, I try to like put on the blinders and not look at what anyone else is teaching or doing. And I go, okay, Andrew, what worked for you? And then that's what I want to teach, and that's what I want to put out there. And that's not just for the education thing, but for like even coming up with a creative cut. Like if I get a model in here who has cool hair and they're just like, I don't care, do whatever. I try to go, okay, let me not think about what everyone's doing and what do I feel. And I asked earlier if you were afraid to put out the work, and I'll admit, like to this day, there's haircuts when I post them, I'm like afraid to post them because a lot of people would think like, oh, you have a big following, everybody must love your work, but it's more like you have a big following, you're inviting so many people in to criticize you. um, but it's an absolute necessity. You won't find anybody who's big in hair who hasn't done that, taken that step to be vulnerable and do something different that really potentially could get hated on. In your scene, I mean, if you look at some of the big dogs, you would imagine they all probably had that moment where they're like, I'm going to do something scary, right? I mean,
Yeah,
probably a
probably. I mean,
universal thing.
to some extent, like art's a pretty small community, so it's like people need to, I think, tend to mince their words a bit. Like there's things I want to say that I'm still afraid to say because like I don't, like I don't want to be thrown out of the club, so to speak. Like,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, yeah, I think at some point, like everyone is probably like, I guess, kind of done something a little bit controversial. Like they've just done something that's like basically different or that's not normal,
Right.
you know? Like their work has been like shitty or whatever, like, but intentionally shitty. Things like that where you're like, like I always love it when someone says like, oh, like my like 6-year-old could draw like a skateboard like that or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
like it's like, yeah, but they didn't. So your 6-year-old, like,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, it's funny. I've gotten that comment about some of my haircuts. My 6-year-old could do this haircut. Yeah, but they didn't. So,
yeah,
and to be honest, this is like so many people in my industry think that our worth is based on our technical abilities, the abilities to do a haircut that a 6-year-old couldn't do. But I
yeah,
found a kind of a niche with clients who, more than the technical ability, what they value is the fact that I don't care if anyone knows I'm good. And so like I did a haircut that was a 6-year-old could do it. And the guy actually flew from New York to get the haircut. And he told me every time I go to a barber, they make it nice and neat and clean because that's what you're supposed to do. And he goes, I've seen your work. I know that you're not afraid to do it messy. I want this messy haircut. But what I found is like people who want good, clean, proper work that looks the way it's supposed to, like, yeah, they're into their hair. But the people who want you to break the rules, they're like fanatics about their hair and they're willing to spend more, they're willing to do more, they'll fly across the country to get a haircut. And so like, not that there's a ton of those kind of clients out there, but do you get that kind of feeling with working with your clients? Like you get some who just want a good drawing, and then you get some who are like, no, I want you to like push the limits of what a drawing is supposed to be.
I think I'm so like my art is so stylized. I think people kind of know what they want coming into it, and it just like I've been fortunate enough to now where people are like, I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you with a haircut, but it's just like, oh, do what you do.
Yeah, yeah, same.
And yeah, I don't know. It's
Well, I've got a thought regarding that.
yeah,
So that what you just kind of touched on there is something that I've definitely experienced in hair, to where you develop your own style to a point that people eventually want your style over
yeah.
the norm, over like, hey, instead of giving me the standard haircut, give me the Andrew haircut. It's like my brand, right? And I kind of assumed that pretty much every artistic medium would have that sort of thing happen, to where, like, if you're a photographer and you shoot things in a certain way for long enough, eventually you could shoot what maybe isn't a traditionally good picture, but because it's your picture and it's your style, then it's worth something, right? And I kind of assumed
Right.
that that's how art works. But I was actually on at least one photography forum in particular where I was asking for advice on how to sell prints, because I wanted to take some more artistic haircut prints, and I got shredded up on this forum. They were like, why would anybody buy a picture of a haircut, like, unless there's a bar where barbers meet after work and the bar wants to decorate? And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe someone will buy it because it's mine. And I'm like, Andrew does hair. I don't know. And talking on this forum, I was like, well, I kind of like, I have a little bit of a following and people kind of like my work. Maybe I could sell a print. I don't know. And in talking to these people, at least this closed-minded bunch on this forum, they were like, it doesn't matter who you are. Nobody wants to buy a haircut photo. And I was so like bummed, because I think it was like my 2017 goal was to sell a print. And I never did it because this photography forum talked me out of it, because they said that it doesn't matter who you are. People won't buy your art just because it's yours. And I don't know.
I said I heavily disagree with that, but go on.
Yeah, I disagree with it too. But also, like, I'm not an expert in the photo world. Like, I'm just kind of a hobbyist. And so when they said in photography it doesn't work that way, I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go over here with my tail between my legs. But I did a haircut one time that was a little on the edgier side, and somebody commented, who was actually a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, like, way to be too honest. But this guy said, this is a bad haircut. If anybody likes this, they just like it because it's yours. And I'm like, oh, but also it's kind of true. You tend to get that in your industry, like somebody could like take a dump on a canvas, and because it's their dump, people will buy it.
Yeah, for sure. There's always that. There's like, I mean, like, I'm not going to say any names or anything, but there's like a handful of people who make art that's like very bad, but people buy it because it's who they are. For sure.
Well, and from my perspective, not being like into art, like I kind of imagine that's how art works. I mean, especially you look at like
Yeah.
Picasso will paint like a blue square, and people are like, "Oh my God, it's a Picasso," and I'm like, "It's a blue square." Like and going back to hair and art being related, when people look at my haircuts and go, "That's not worth $100," I'm like, "It is, because it's mine." Okay, so like in that way, I'm an artist. I'm a freaking artist, man. I could do. I'm going to sound so horrible right now and probably edit this out, but if I do a haircut that somebody else could do for $20, it's still $100 haircut because I did it. Like,
Yeah.
not because, oh, I'm so great, but because that's the perceived value that I've been able to get at least enough people to fill my chair to believe. And so I don't know, I guess like perceived value is really the key there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it like that's I don't know. I'm like, I think that's closed minded for sure to be like a photographer, like a haircutter can't sell a print. Like, why couldn't you? I don't know. I don't think traditionally though, like, I mean, like, I don't like, I appreciate like Renaissance paintings and stuff, but I don't like them really. Like they don't appeal to me. Like I always liked Picasso as a kid more than I like ever liked Michelangelo. You know,
Right.
this might be controversial, but it's like it's just like I don't understand why you need photorealistic paintings
When we have cameras.
when we have cameras. Like I would much more like prefer something stylized like Picasso or like Matisse or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't appeal to me. Like I can paint photorealistic things like, but I choose not to. I don't think that's what people understand. Like this, like what I do is a choice.
Yeah.
Like they probably don't understand that with haircuts either. Like they don't understand maybe the nuances of things where it's like, oh, like that line is crooked, but like by choice. That's not like I suck at cutting hair. You could
Yeah,
do
exactly. Well, it's funny
you
because I
could
could post like 6 by the book perfect haircuts or whatever, technically good haircuts, and then I'll post one haircut where I deliberately broke a rule, and people are like, "Dude, you messed up." I'm like, "Come on, man!" Like, so I
yeah.
messed up. I didn't notice it, even as I took a picture of it and posted it. I didn't even notice that I messed up. Oh man, funny.
It just I think you have to like kind of find whatever you're doing, it's like you sort of find it your audience and people who resonate with you.
Oh, absolutely. That actually leads right into what I was about to try to bring up is like talk about branding. Viewers, Nick here works as a branding guy. I don't know. What do you do? Like marketing?
I'm
Some
a yeah, a creative director,
creative director. That's the term.
but
And
like a real one, not like I just put that on like my Instagram handle.
yeah, he works for a big, rich brand. And I wanted to talk to him here about some of this because every barber, every hairstylist, whether you know it or not, you are a brand. You are creating a brand. Before I even had Instagram, I had a client who was in marketing who explained to me that you, Andrew, you have a brand. You're a brand. And I was like, no, I'm just a hair cutter. This is again before Instagram. And so it's not like I had a logo and a product line and stuff. And so I started reading a lot of business and marketing books and looking at what I did behind the chair as a brand. And like every one of us cutting hair, we all have a brand. Even and a brand isn't just a logo and a slogan. Like
Yeah,
it's everything about the way that you post and the way you talk and the way your haircuts look. And when you take one creative decision over another, like that's all a part of your brand. And I think actually this same guy that told me I was a brand, he defined a brand as a promise of a certain level of quality. Like when you see a brand name on something, you go by Tide, you know Tide detergent is going to be this good. Where when you go by the off brand, you don't know how good it's going to be. And so the name
right.
when something is a brand, it's just a promise of a certain level of quality. Anyways, Nick, I know you probably don't follow like any barbers. I know you follow Tim Syndicate.
Yeah.
Do you ever have any thoughts if you do come across a haircut page or even looking at my page about like what could or should be done to, I don't know, make a brand more appealing? Or do you ever walk by a barbershop and think like, oh, they should do this to their sign? Or I don't know. Is there like a bare minimum that the average barber or hairstylist could do to just pump up their brand a little more?
I mean, it's interesting. It's like in terms of like shops and whatever, I don't know. It's weird because I'm so in the weeds with this stuff. Like I understand like by looking at something like, oh, I know they have $5 haircuts here. Or like kids' haircuts are $5 at this place or like whatever. I mean, it's
You can
just
tell by the font.
it's tough because I look at things practically. And so I'm like, oh, it's not wrong to do that because like there's no reason like if all they're doing is trying to do like get people in and out and do $10 haircuts, like there's no reason any of this stuff should look nice. When you walk by, you know, like a salon by like the beach or whatever, you know, oh, like my haircut's gonna cost like $50 to $100 at that spot. And it has kind of like subtle branding and everything, you know. I just think there's like different tiers of things, and it's like how you want to be viewed or perceived is sort of how you need to act for your brand, I suppose.
Do you think do you think it would be important for, like, let's just say we had 100 barbers listening to this. Do you think it's important for 100 barbers to have 100 unique approaches to what they're putting out in their brand? Or do you think it's also kind of important to adhere to some of the common things like the checkered floor and the spinning barber pole? Like, do you think that everybody needs to be super unique in their branding? Or do you think that there's a place for just kind of doing things normal? And
I
maybe
think
on either side.
there's room for both. I mean, it's like really what your aspirations are. Yeah, if you want to do a bunch of haircuts during the day and just go home and not think about things, not have an Instagram page, like there's no reason to do any of that stuff. Like if you're happy where you're at, then that's fine. If you're trying to be like some kind of hairstylist or win awards or something, you're just like be perceived as being like a higher value hair cutter, like you should then start to like look at how you present yourself and like how your photos look and all that stuff. Like, I mean, it's really it's really contingent on like what someone's goal is as a hair person.
Yeah. And I don't know, I might get some haters for this, but 9 out of 10 Instagram accounts I look at with barbers, it's almost like they haven't considered whether they want to be high end or low end. Like they don't even think that far into it. They just go, oh, I started cutting hair. I started working here. This is what they charged. And so that's what I charge. And I'm like, well, who do you want to be? And I think
Exactly.
it's great
Yeah.
that you keep touching on like, well, it all matters on what it all depends on, like the kind of haircuts you want to do. I think that's freaking huge. I think even like in my own career, probably 2 or 3 years in, I sat down with a hairdresser who was at the time charging like $150 for haircuts, and he was killing it. And he asked me like, well, what kind of haircutter do you want to be? And I was like, what do you mean? And like nobody had ever asked me that.
Yeah.
And I think thankfully, because I was asked that so early in my career, and then when I answered him, I told him like, I just want to have a lot of clients who are like homies. Like I just want like a chill space to hang out and cut hair and have fun. He looked disgusted. He was like, you mean you don't want to like do magazine covers and runway stuff? And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I do want to do all that. But I think having that thought put into my head so early on was really, really helpful for my career. Because then I probably overanalyzed it at times. Like even down to like getting dressed for work every day. I'm like, do I want to wear this shirt with a hole in it, or do I want to wear a button-up shirt with a tie? So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool that you're mentioning think about who you want to be basically as a barber or hairstylist.
Think of something like a shoelace. I'm sure there's like a shoelace that's probably like the lightest shoelace you could possibly own and like cost $20 versus like a pair of shoelaces you could buy for like $2.
Right.
Like they both serve a purpose, but it's like understanding what you're spending the money on sort of, and like trying to I don't know, I'm sorry, that's probably not a good analogy, but
Wait, well, let me ask you this. Do you think there's cases where people will buy the more expensive hoodie or more expensive haircut even and not even know exactly why? Like they're just like, no, it's just better. It's like, well, why is it better? Like, oh, I don't know. It just is because it's $100 and not $30. You know? Do you get
I think
a lot
there
of that?
is. Yeah, for
I
sure.
think I
Like
think I see that too. Like people will ask me as rude as this is, people will kind of ask me to defend why I charge $100 for a haircut, and my simple, quick answer is because if I charged any less, I'd be too booked. That's all it is. But also, the reasons I could list the things that I do, like again, I built up the perceived value because I'm Andrew. I shampoo every head. I work in a cool salon and like cool area. Like I could list all these things, but I guarantee if I asked one of my regular clients, like, hey, why do you come to me and not anyone else? They wouldn't list any of those same things. And so
yeah.
I think that's kind of a thing we have in my industry where we want to like stack up the facts about like, oh, I charge more because this, and this. And I'm like, well, how much of that does your client even know about? All my clients know, and this is what they've told me when I have kind of asked them. They say, all I know is when I get a haircut anywhere else, I usually go home or the second day when I style it and it's just not right. But I know when I get a haircut with you that I'm just going to look good. And it goes back to what
Yeah.
I said about the brand. It's like a promise of a certain level of quality.
Right.
I don't know. Do you guys ever get with your brand people going, well, why does the hoodie cost this much? What makes it different than a regular hoodie?
All the time, yeah. So like I work for a sort of like higher end apparel brand, and yeah, we have hoodies that are like $130 for like just a plain hoodie. And so yeah, I think people are just like, why would I buy $150 hoodie when I could buy like a hoodie at Walmart for $20? It's like, well, the quality is significantly better. Like it's made with much better materials. The materials themselves are much more expensive, And then like the little details on the hoodie that we like that get put into that make it more expensive, like, or just make it better.
Viewers, I actually own one of these hoodies, and the first time you pick it up, you go, "Oh my god!" Like it's so heavy. It's just like the thickest, heaviest hoodie material you've ever felt, and it just lays so nice. And it's got this the cut of it is just slim and long. And one detail I like is it doesn't have the drawstring, so it's really really clean looking. But uh, I think another interesting point maybe that comes up as you're talking about this is like a lot of times people will ask like, well, why is your hoodie $150 and not $20? And then even if you show them the difference, it's not worth it to them. And
Yeah.
I think I had a wrong mindset for a lot of years to where I felt like it was my job to convince $20 hoodie guy that the $150 hoodie is worth it. But I no longer have that mindset. If I sit and I say, well, this is why my haircuts are worth more, and somebody goes, well, I just don't believe it. I still don't think it's worth more. I'm like, cool. Let me send you to this guy down the street who does $25 haircuts. Like, I don't even feel the need to try to explain my art to people. No, like, I don't. I used to think I had to like prove to everybody why it was worth this much, but like now I'm like, this is what it is. If you like it, let's hang out. If you don't like it, we can still hang out, but I'm not gonna cut your hair for $20. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I mean, like I think there's just this like large group of there's just people that aren't going to pay that much for something, and they're vocal about it. Like every day, like I on Instagram and stuff, there's comments that are like, why would I spend this much on this? Like, oh, like why aren't your prices more affordable? It's like we really can't make them more affordable. Like if we wanted to, like it costs more to make, like to produce this stuff. Like, and I mean, I think what's interesting is because it's like these are sort of like utilitarian items where it's like a haircut is something everybody needs,
right.
but it's like not everybody wants a haircut, I guess. Like, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And I think especially like, excuse me, especially going through this kind of pandemic thing right now with the lockdowns and all this, it's really shed a light on what a haircut is worth. Something I think is maybe going to happen because of all the unemployment and everybody's broke because of this is when we do get back to cutting hair, I think there will be a lot less people who want $100 haircut and a lot more people who go, well, I normally get $100 haircuts, but I'm unemployed now, so now I'm going to get a $20 haircut. And it's going back to perceived value. Like when life is good, you worry about things like $150 hoodie or $100 haircut. But when life is hard, you're like, I need to get a burrito today, and I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't know. I mean, that's all just speculation. I could get back to work and just be absolutely swamped, but I'm a little bit worried that a lot of my clients are going to be like, no, sorry, I have to go to a cheaper haircutter for a while. I'm not actually worried about it. If it happens, and I'll be okay. But I see. I told myself like, don't talk about the pandemic. Don't make it about that. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how it changes consumers' values on certain things. But I don't know. That's probably
Yeah,
another conversation.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how things are going to play out. I mean, especially like in the art world, it's like not a necessity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I wonder how many brands are going to go, we didn't really have a spring season this year, so we'll just use the same art from last year. Like they're going to just recycle stuff you drew for them months ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I think like I mean, in that industry, like I think a lot of brands are going to fold, but like this
Have
is
you
what it is, sort of.
seen the pandemic change a lot of your industry as far as like, so there's the obvious stuff where you put out apparel or content that is about the pandemic to where you're kind of touching on people's emotions that are brought about by this thing. But
Yeah.
aside from that, like, have you seen styles or anything change because of it? Like, I know that when times get tough, people tend to get more like basic and utilitarian. Like the whole like classic men's haircut got really popular after the recession when everyone was poor and they're like, I just need to buzz my head short. And I know that in right now, what I'm seeing a lot of popping up and becoming popular is like long hair or buzzed hair, And I joked
Yeah.
about that at the beginning of the pandemic, but it's actually happening now. Like, have you guys seen any stylistic changes in what's coming out? It probably doesn't happen immediately in your industry because it has to, like, you guys kind of plan a collection months out, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting because there is like, I'm curious to see what happens because like I know there's definitely like a boost in like loungewear and sweatpants and things like that currently because everyone's like at home. But moving forward, yeah, I'm interested to see how things change because yeah, after the recession last time, there was like the whole like let's buy salvage denim and like
Yeah.
do what grandma and grandpa did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now it's kind of like we're in a different place where it's sort of like fashion has been kind of more driven by like NBA players and hip hop and stuff. So or rap. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I mean, I've already kind of been seeing like a this there's like the nostalgia factor again, but it's more like for the 90s and like late 90s. So I'm curious to see if that aesthetic changes because
Brother
of this.
dressing like Third Eye Blind.
Yeah, we're dressing like skaters from the 90s, like
Oh yeah, I
what we
haven't
wore when
thought
we were
about that.
kids, like baggy, like
Yeah,
zip
the
off
baggy dickies.
pants and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's been a while. Probably got some good content for an episode here. So
Cool.
I've never been good at goodbyes. Appreciate you being here. Sorry everybody for the abrupt ending here. I just kind of we're winging this if you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, dude.
Thanks for having me.